Good afternoon to you. Happy Friday, happy payday to you. If it's payday, I know January has been a very long month. It should be payday, right? Because it's the 24th and usually paid on the 5th. So happy payday to you listeners. I know you're driving home happy. So welcome to Nationwide at 5. Dana looks happy. It's the cover story. Dana says Siobhan has been grinning from Wednesday. I'm Ricardo Brooks.
And I'm here.
You get paid from Wednesday?
I'm here. Listeners, viewers, I'm here.
Happy Friday, listeners. Thank you so much for joining us. As you know, it has been a rough couple of days in Spanish Town, and that's where we're going to start this afternoon. The Prime Minister was in Westmoreland, and he did address what we saw unfolding in the old capital. He's pleading with residents of Spanish Town to assist the police in ridding the communities of gangs. He says so that investments can flow into the area. And of course, Siobhan, you would know that for so long now, people have talked about the potential of Spanish Town. I've long wondered about why the historical and cultural significance has not been capitalized. I love going into Emancipation Square and just thinking about the history that's just present in that little area and what the potential could be. The Prime Minister is pleading now to the residents to do what they can to rid the communities of gangs. Here's what he told his audience this afternoon.
Yesterday, the National Security Council received a briefing from the JCF regarding the situation in Spanish Town. We are satisfied that the police have made the necessary allocation of manpower and other resources to bring the situation in Spanish Town under control and to return calm to the town. Nevertheless, the intelligence briefing is that the gangs continue to pose a clear and present danger and a real threat to public order, citizen security, public services, and commerce in Spanish Town. For decades, the gangs have captured Spanish Town, almost all elements of life in Spanish Town. The government of Jamaica is paying close attention to this situation, not just from a security perspective, but from a developmental perspective. The government is investing several $1 billion into critical infrastructure in Spanish Town, starting with the investment in a new wing at the Spanish Town Hospital, over $2 billion investment, and the building of a new police divisional headquarters in Spanish Town, another $2 billion, in addition to planned works in roads and water. We will not allow our development plans to be derailed or hijacked by gangs. There is a sense, and we have seen it displayed publicly, that somehow the gangs are protectors of the community or are your friends. The gangs are not your protector. They are not your friends. They are using you. The plan of the government, however, is not to target communities and harm communities in pursuit of the gangs. The strategy of the government is to separate the gangs and criminals from the community and law-abiding citizens. I take this opportunity to appeal to the law-abiding citizens of Spanish Town, not to support the gangs, not to be enlisted in their activities. This is finally an opportunity for the liberation of Spanish Town and indeed other communities. The truth is that the gangs account for more than 70% of murders in Jamaica. We have been able to reduce murders in Jamaica by targeting the gangs, eroding and depleting their capabilities. So last year, we are able to say we reduced murders by 20%. We will continue to target the gangs, and we ask for the support of the citizens in these communities where the gangs have infested and captured the life of the community. If you help the police, if you cooperate with the government strategy in helping us to clear the space of this threat, more investments will find its way to your community, not just from the government, but from the private sector. Spanish Town has incredible opportunities. Spanish Town has an incredible history. It has great commerce and great potential for development. But it is all being suppressed by gangs and crime. Let us use this as an opportunity to once and for all rid the community of the gangs. The police have been instructed that in their activities, in targeting the gangs, innocent citizens, law-abiding citizens must be protected. And indeed, we have seen that there has been a significant improvement in police-community relations. We don't want to damage that. We want to enhance that and improve that. The government strategy is to go after the gangs, and we will use all lawful tools in our toolkit. We will bring down the murder rate, and we will keep the people of Jamaica safe. You know, the truth is that we have allowed, as a country, gangs to control for far too long. And now it is time that we take charge of spaces like Spanish Town and take them back from the gang.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness there, the Prime Minister is right on several points there. But you know, Siobhan, I was doing some reading recently and I was reminded of how Spanish Town and the two dominant gangs that have operated in that area, right, were, if not encouraged, if not supported, were certainly facilitated at a time by political parties in this country. And I have said that I think on a lot of things we need truth and reconciliation. So the Prime Minister is right. For a long time, he says we, the collective society, we've given succor to gangs. But the political parties must also be very frank about how they ceded control of territory to these hoodlums and criminals so that they could be supported and bolstered politically, and so whole communities became garrisons and developed under the gun. That is a part of the problem. And what I have seen in recent days on social media is distressing. You know, you see a lot of people almost celebrating gangsterism. I saw comments, for example, online, and forgive me, listeners, because this is, brutal. One police have a dead back. You know, that's where we are. That's the kind of thinking that's out there in our population. But again, the political parties must atone and accept the role they played in creating, or at least facilitating, these criminal enterprises.
And you'd swear that it never happened. To this day, many of these politicians like to pretend that the creation of these gangs had nothing to do with them, as if they simply sprang up on their own. Now that these creations that sprung up under the different subsequent administrations are now essentially not theirs to be in control.
Right. I was reading again in the reading about, and I went to ask Cliff and George about this because it was so fascinating to me. Heather Robinson, a former member of Parliament, and I found excerpts of a speech she gave in the Parliament. And if I could just find it back, I'm going to read part of it to you listeners, where she essentially pleaded with her colleagues in the Parliament to assist her in the same Spanish Town environs, to help her in confronting the threat from gangs. And as I understand it, she got no support, and eventually she resigned and left the Parliament. This article I found it fascinating. The headline, "Bulby's Ruthless Reign Shielded by Politicians," was written way back in 2008 by the Observer's Carol Walker. And in relevant part, the article says, at the time of his death in October 2005, police say they linked Bulby to at least 80 murders. Among those killed by Bulby and his cronies were a number of PMP workers who worked for the bewildered Robinson. At the time, the former politician threatened to resign after accusing a PMP councillor of colluding with Bulby and facilitating garrison politics. While her workers were being killed like flies, Robinson appealed to her colleagues in Parliament to dismantle tribalism and dismantle the power base of the Dons. In an impassioned plea, Robinson told Parliament that she would not hug up criminals and was not able to give birth to a Don. She's quoted as saying, "In that regard, I am truly barren," she said in the famous speech in Gordon House. She says, "Are there any of us in this house who would dare to go to the constituency that they represent and declare to these number one Dons or now super predators that we are finished with them and no longer need their services?" She also hit out at the old style of politics. Some of the old dogs in this parliament, she's quoted as saying, need to be taught new approaches. So yes, and this is way back when. So for a long time, these criminal organizations, as a member of the parliament then told her colleagues, were essentially being facilitated and given succor.
And now we're trying to sweep it under the rug, so to speak.
And as Siobhan said, they're out of control now. Yeah, but let us hope that we can continue the downward trend in terms of dismantling them and eroding their power base. Of course, tensions flared in several communities in Spanish Town after Wednesday's police fatal shooting of the reputed leader of the One Order gang, Othniel Thickman Loban. There was sustained gunfire, several roads were blocked, and at least one building was firebombed when the criminals challenged the police. Order has been restored, the police say, following the imposition of a 48-hour curfew. So Holness began by talking about the Dons. He also touched on another matter, the signature housing program, the new social housing program, which came under scrutiny following an Auditor General report, the Auditor General concluding that it was a duplication of other government efforts. But the Prime Minister says the initiative is aimed at meeting specific needs.
Today, what you're seeing is the culmination of years of planning, really detailed planning as to how to deliver a specific kind of social benefit. And that is the social benefit which we call social housing. Social housing is a provision of shelter to persons who are not earning any income, they are unemployed, they may be elderly, they may be infirm, they may be ill, they have large households, and in this particular modality, when we look at their existing housing condition, it is substandard. And we provide them with a housing unit. There are other modalities in which we provide the social housing benefit. Sometimes the Ministry of Local Government provides a kind of social housing facility through what is called shelters for persons who are homeless. They also provide infirmary facilities for persons who are ill, but their family can't take care of them. This modality actually seeks to construct a housing unit. But as our permanent secretary explained, it is done under very rigorous circumstances. I'm sure that in the audience that I'm looking at here, which may be about 50 persons, maybe 10 would say, I would love to have a house like this. And we would like to give it to you. But because it is in such a high demand, and because the house is given freely, we have to be very careful how we use taxpayers' resources. So we must ensure that the beneficiary is legitimate, that you meet the criteria set, and that you genuinely need the benefit. And the real measure of the genuine need is when the 10 others who are in the crowd say, I agree that Mrs. Gray and her family should get the house. Because that's the ultimate in terms of the validation of any beneficiary identification system. And in all the houses that we have given, over 300, I have never heard any dissenting voice regarding the beneficiary. And so we know we have a very good beneficiary identification system.
Now, this one I've always found interesting because I wrote that story regarding the Auditor General's assessment. I know people keep focusing on the specific one that the Prime Minister has essentially flagship, that is the new social housing program. But what many people forget is that she cited 4 different entities that she felt had overlapping mandates.
I think you're being euphemistic when you say people. A particular section of the media decided to focus on that part and highlight it.
I'm just trying to be fair.
Yeah,
so it was the new social housing program, the social housing program, the NHT, and the CDF. Now, I would ask listeners and anyone listening, and the politicians specifically, would you then suggest that the CDF be removed? Because that has been suggested many times, that the CDF serves no real purpose other than a pork barrel. Would you then suggest that the CDF be removed? Would you suggest that the NHT rescind from providing certain housing benefits?
Which I think when he initially, the Prime Minister that is, responded, and some thought his response was a bit forceful, I thought that was what he was getting at. That, yeah, and most of what he said just now, sort of makes that distinction. That yes, housing, they provide housing writ large, like as a general concept, but still being targeted to specific needs, which is something I would hope that the Parliament can have the Auditor General before them to question her on, because that was the Prime Minister's response, and I found that persuasive. That makes sense to me, as you just said, the fact that the NHT provides housing and the social housing program provides housing doesn't mean you're providing housing to the same people. So when you say that's a duplication, is it really? I think that's a fair question.
And to be fair to the Auditor General, 2 things can be right at once, because she's coming for it from an efficiency standpoint. Would it be the most efficient thing to have a single entity that provides for the housing and social benefits of the country? Yes, but would it be sensible to have a single entity do it?
Here's my challenge when we say that, if it would be more efficient. Do we have a track record as a country of providing efficiency through singular projects?
Well,
I don't know that we do. I mean, and sure, one can make the argument that we should improve, right, and seek to fix the inefficiencies rather than creating a new program. But what happens in the interim to those who absolutely need the assistance? Because when you look at some of the housing, the structures that some of these people lived in before they access the benefit under the new social housing program, it really breaks your heart to think that people are living in those conditions.
Zinc houses.
Right. And
sometimes in a single shed room.
Precisely, with multiple people sometimes living it. So the question for me is, and I've always said this, is I understand the need for efficient processes. But what happens in the interim when the state does not deliver because it is being slavish to the process and making sure all T's are crossed, all I's are dotted? What happens to the people who don't get the benefit they need? I think they lose confidence in the state's ability to provide for them, and I think they turn to bad faith actors who say to them, I can give it to you now.
And I wonder why I don't know, I wouldn't say it's an Auditor General, but would it be unfair then for an individual to go to their MP and the MP gives them, say, $10,000 grant from their CDF to help towards a house,
but you see again,
and then they
Siobhan,
go to the NHT to get a loan for the house? Is that unfair?
But we have practiced and we've developed a culture where we think everybody is a thief. So the moment you hear that a member of parliament is being allotted a certain amount of money to distribute to constituents, there are voices in this society who say no. They say no. And I think it stems from the assumption that everybody a thief. And so some malfeasance will happen, some corruption will happen. That's the reality. And so we put layer upon layer, bureaucracy on bureaucracy to try to catch all the thieves. And then I fear in what we have created, the state has been rendered unable to provide. Just the other day, you had a story about the capital budget. And the fact that for the second consecutive year, I believe they haven't been able to spend
$19 billion because they couldn't get a project off the ground.
Part of that is because we've built up these layers and these hoops to jump through. And I think the basic assumption is everybody a thief. So I don't know. We're going to have to address the integrity issues because those are important issues, sure. But we're going to have to ensure that the state can deliver benefits. $19 billion not being spent. That's a shame, you know. That's a crying shame. And the people the Jamaican people should benefit. And they're not benefiting. And they lose confidence in the state. They get angry, frustrated, nothing now go on, government now do nothing. I don't know. It seems to me a vicious cycle.
It's a cycle that we seem unable to fix because and this is my opinion, I can't say this broadly, but in some ways I feel as if the bureaucracy, as in the public service bureaucracy, it deliberately puts up hurdles in order to benefit itself and certain individuals in said bureaucracy to make themselves useful. Otherwise, you question their usefulness.
I will say, it seems to me that the bureaucracy that we've built rewards process over results. So if you push the paper and you followed all the steps and you did that and it was done right, you get to ticky. But it seems to me that it matters little whether the end result was achieved. I think that's a problem. That's a real problem.
And yet, when we turn to the politicians and say they are the ones responsible for not delivering 3% growth, 4% growth, and I wonder if Jamaicans would simply do a little introspection and say to themselves, is it the fault of the politicians solely that the country is in the state that it is? Do we as Jamaicans not bear some responsibility for the outcomes that we face in our lives collectively? Are we just incapable of doing that introspection? Or is it because the politicians are so at each other's throats that they give Jamaicans succor in believing that they have no agency in changing their lives?